Good afternoon, everybody. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive, and I'm joined by everybody in Westchester County. And I would love to go through all of the introductions, but we have represented here mayors and supervisors of villages and towns. We have with us, on their behalf, members of council in the various communities and village boards of trustees. We have with us school district leaders, both elected leaders as well as school superintendents of a variety of districts that are here. We have members of the Westchester County Board of Legislators led by their chairman, Ben Boykin. We have members of the state delegation to Westchester to the state legislature led by the leader of the state Senate, Andrea Stewart-Cousins, and State Assemblyman Tom Abenanti on the assembly side. And we're going to hear from quite a few of these folks. And when we're finished going through some of these very specific things that we want to convey, any and all of them will be available for individual interviews if you want to interview them specifically on the process. I'm sorry that this will take a little while because we're going to try to basically lay out a narrative about something we've talked a lot about, but now we're at the point to deal with and deliver those things that we've committed and promised to. 18 months ago, our administration came into office, and we faced a couple of very specific realities. We received the notification from the State Controller's Office that we were one of the four, Westchester County government was one of the four most financially stressed governments in New York State. And we followed that up by asking the Controller on day one to do a more detailed audit. A few months later, they came back with a study that highlighted a host of concerns that they had about the fiscal stability of Westchester County government. We had bond rating agencies, the three major agencies, Moody's, S&P, and Fitch's, all looking askance at our bond rating. And before the year was over, based on the information leading up through 2017, they had lowered our bond ratings, put us on negative outlook. Two of the three put us on negative outlook, and all three lowered our bond ratings. We looked at a list of deferred capital in Westchester County. Now, my friends in the county legislature, Alfreda Williams, the vice chair, Catherine Parker, the majority leader, Mary Jane Shimsky, the majority whip, David Tubiola is with us here, Damon Marr is here, Kidley Koval, Terry Clemens, Nancy Barr. Have I missed any of my colleagues in the county legislature? Catherine Borgia, because she was standing behind Mary Jane Shimsky. All of these individuals were well aware and within their legislative authority tried to deal with the backlog of deferred maintenance, but they were all important issues that they had been struggling with prior to our taking office. We had open union contracts that we had to deal with. The most notable one, David Tubio, I forgot to mention. Thank you, David. CSEA, who said I was perfect? Nobody. The CSEA contract, which represented 3/4 of our workforce, had been out for 7 years. We inherited that walking in the door, nurses' contracts and some other ones. We had expiring contracts, Liberty Lines bus system and others, all of which we walked in the door, and we knew that we had to deal with them in some structure of time. But we also realized we had to deal with them in the reality of Westchester County and the reality of suburban life, which is property taxes is the great third rail of discussion of means of revenue in suburbia. It may be true in upstate New York, but in the world that we live in, people pay high property taxes. They're not happy about it. They pay a certain amount to the school district, a certain amount to the local government, and a certain amount to the county government. When people say, my county taxes in Westchester are high, they don't differentiate. They attach the name of the county to the amount of property taxes that they pay. And with that thought, we understood that we had to stabilize the finances given all those things, but we also had to do it in a responsible way, and we couldn't touch property taxes appropriately. We did our first budget in 2018 for the 2019 year. We kept the property tax increase consistent below what was allowed to us under the state tax cap at a 2%, but we did it with the understanding that we had to restructure the way we did this. And the county government is not alone in this challenge. Every municipal government and school district that stands with us here has in some shape or form the same types of problems. The larger the community, the more complicated the public services, the greater the issues are. The smaller the community, the issues may be a little bit smaller, the numbers are smaller, but the need is just the same. Because every one of these local governments has to provide police, fire, sanitation, snow removal, a certain degree of recreation that's expected by their municipality. Every school district that stands here has the responsibility for K-12 education, and it doesn't matter if you're educating 7,000, 8,000 students in the White Plains district, or you're educating 3,500 students in the Rye City district, that level of education has to be there in every single district. And different communities have different demographic realities and different needs. All of those things may not be the corporate responsibility of the county government, but I've had the good fortune to have been a local municipal official, served in both houses of the state legislature, served in the county legislature in both majority and minority status, and I knew that when we can't stabilize Westchester County's government's stability of finances unless we also help all of those other jurisdictions. And when I turned to our state legislators to talk through these things and turned to our county legislators to talk through this thing, we got 100% support. You could not have asked for more support from Andre Stewart-Cousins, Shelley Mayer, Alessandra Biaggi, and even those that may not have voted for the bill were still supportive of what we were trying to do, and Peter Harcum and others. And on the Assembly side, a very strong legislative delegation, Gary Pretlow, Amy Paulin, Sandy Gale of Tom Abenanti, David Buchwald, Steve Otis, and Nader Sage, and I didn't even read it from a list. The bottom line is each one of these people were responsive and willing to help us through this difficulty. When we sat with members of the Board of Legislators, it was not a partisan battle. Those who didn't support it, or the individuals that didn't support it, did it out of principle, not out of malice. The remaining legislators, Republicans and Democrats, found common ground. And we talked not just about how we needed additional revenue. We talked about how we would use the revenue to stabilize the structure of the government, meaning that we had eaten into our reserves in consecutive years and brought it down to a record low of $65 million. And that's one of the major reasons why we suffered in our bond rating, and that we needed to show a commitment to replenishing that reserve fund in order to get back that bond rating. We had to show that we were prepared to undo one-shot efforts, and we budgeted a major one-shot to balance the budget in 2019. My good friend David McKay Wilson's out here covering this. He and I had a long, detailed, and completely honorable, civil conversation on Facebook. I learned a lesson last week, but it's okay. I'm not too old to learn something. But the bottom line is we knew that we had to undo one-shots, and we had to put money in the reserve fund. That was absolutely necessary. We knew we had to share revenue with the local governments and the school districts. It was absolutely a necessity. And the need for us to do those things had to come within a context that our colleagues in the state legislature could be comfortable with. John Nona, our county attorney, is present here today. During the process of us dealing with that particular one-shot involving Parkland, he identified that state legislation allowed the county government to circumvent the state legislature in matters of Parkland alienation. And Tom Abenanti, other members of the Assembly, Amy Paulin, raised that as a deep concern. And we said, we will address that too. I promise you, we will address that as long as everything else. When we deal with the issue of sales tax, which is what generates the revenue you're about to see today, we understand that sales tax is seen as a regressive tax. However, property taxes are a more regressive tax. We don't have the option of income tax, which is progressive. We don't have the option of business tax, where we can tax corporate gains. That's not given to county governments to levy. Two major revenue streams. And the revenue stream of sales tax, Westchester County's communities outside of the four big cities, was below every other jurisdiction around us. What we've done today, what we asked the state legislature and the governor to do, which they agreed to do, is give us sales tax parity, so that if you buy a product in Wacabuck, you pay the same sales tax that you would pay in White Plains. If you buy something in North Castle or Newcastle, it's now the same tax that you would pay in New Rochelle. Yonkers still has a bit of a higher tax than the rest of us do. So does New York City. So does Long Island. We continue to be below Long Island, New York City, Oneida County, Erie County, Allegheny County, and a couple of other places that have higher sales tax rates than what we have. But sales tax parity is what we strove for, and we knew that that was a defensible position to take. The question of progressivity comes up in terms of people who are poor. The highest concentration of poor in this county are located in our four major cities. It's not the universe of all the poor people that exist, but it's the highest concentration in the city of Mount Vernon, the city of my birth, in the city of Yonkers, and then to some extent in New Rochelle and White Plains. Those poor people on the south side of Mount Vernon, those poor folk in southwest Yonkers are already paying a higher sales tax. So what we basically said is that sales tax parity meant that places like Bronxville and Armonk and Rye and Larchmont and places where there was a higher percentage of wealthy people would now be brought up to the equal level, because most of what the county government spends its money on are services for people who are middle class, working class, and poor. The bus system that we have, very few of the wealthiest people in our county ride that bus system. We provide flu shots in our 2 clinics in White Plains and Yonkers. Most folks, middle class and above, don't need a public distribution of flu shots. They have their own medical professionals to go to, but we have to provide that for their benefit. And a host of other services through the Department of Social Services that directly provide services to poor people, funded by county government, funded by county property taxes, and by sales taxes. So we knew that sales tax parity meant that we could freeze property taxes, which is what we've committed to do, and at the same time have the money to generate, to be able to deliver the services we at the county would have to do it. We wouldn't have to do some of those games that get played from time to time where the county dumps a cost on a local government. Every so often the federal government dumps on a state. Sometimes the state dumps on the county. County has historically dumped on the towns and villages, but not now. That's not what we believe in. We don't believe in partisanship when it comes to the running of the government. We have our differences philosophically. We battle them out in November. But the day after that election is over, we're all Americans. And we work together through our differences to try to solve problems. And we don't point to other governments and say, you're to blame, not me, and not solve the problem. And that's what we tried to accomplish today by this effort. A few things that I'd like to share with you very specifically here that we have. And we have copies of this for each of the members of the press. Anybody from the community that happens to be here, we have copies for you as well. I have signed an executive, or will sign an executive order, which says the following, amongst other things: regardless of existing state law, it shall be the executive branch policy to submit any proposed sale or conveyance of any building improvement or materials within the boundary lines of parkland owned by the county or any parcels of parkland owned by the county and greater than 2 acres in size, that would be submitted to the County Board of Legislators, the State Assembly, and State Senate as the subject of state legislation in accordance with all relevant rules for parkland alienation. Furthermore, the executive branch will submit proposed home rule resolutions to the County Board of Legislators to accompany the legislation submitted to the State Assembly and to the State Senate. What does that mean? What that means is the fact that state law allows the county government to circumvent the state legislature is still not the policy of Westchester County government under my administration. So for the 2.5 years that I've been granted by the people of Westchester County, as I sign this executive order, this states categorically that we will not use that loophole in order to work around the state legislature. We respect the authority of the Assembly and the Senate and the governor to make decisions about parkland alienation. That is what was intended in the state constitution, and that is what will be the policy of Westchester County. And if the state can pass a law next year to make it a law, we support that, and that will obviate the need for this executive order. But this executive order will stand as a statement of commitment, Tom, to the things I've told you personally, and I'm signing it into authority right now, but not with that pen. And I know we're not supposed to do this, but David, take this pen. You earned it. The next thing I'd like to share, which is out there for all of you to see, is a memo which I have sent today to Joan McDonald, who's with us here, our Director of Operations. Joan? Oh, she's out there, and also Larry Sewell, who's our Budget Director. Both of them are with us today. I might add, Ken Jenkins, our Deputy County Executive, is on a travel mission to Israel right now. We wish him Godspeed, and he is out there doing some terrific work for us, and that's why he couldn't be here today. This memo basically says, in light of the passage of the Westchester County Property Taxpayer Protection Act, please prepare for review and passage 2019 county budget amendments, that means coming near to you, Ben, that accomplish the following tasks. Delete revenue of $23 million from the proposed sale of county center parking lots to the county LDC to be replaced by added sales tax revenue. The second element of the budget amendment for this year is to add an additional $5 million to the county reserve fund based on additional sales tax. That's the first addition to our county reserve fund that we have had in any recent number of years. $5 million this year for this year. I believe that will be a document that will come as an amendment to the Board of Legislators for their review. I assume, hopefully, they'll speedily approve of it. In addition, continuing the directive to Joan and Larry, as we draft the proposed 2020 county budget, which will be delivered to the Board of Legislators in November and for public scrutiny, please ensure that our draft projects the same county property tax levy for 2020 as was budgeted for 2019, rounded off to $571 million. That is the commitment to freeze property taxes for fiscal year 2020. Secondly, establishes the county's unrestricted reserve fund at $80 million, which represents an additional increase of $10 million in the reserve fund for 2020. It's at 65 now. Our immediate action will take it to 70, and next year in the budget, we'll add another $10 million to get it to 80. We are on the road back to where we should have been all along, and that is a memo that has been given to Joan McDonnell, Larry Sewell. That is their responsibility to come back with a full budget. There's so many other factors to take into account, but this is a completion and a commitment of our commitment to do so. And of course, I intend to continue that commitment for fiscal year 2021 budget, if I'm still around. Next, we have for you to see projected sales tax revenues for the additional 1% share for the mid-year August to December and for the full year of January to December 2020. Let me make a note, a qualifier note, not particularly of great interest. The authority of this piece of legislation expires November 30th of 2020. It would be subject to reauthorization by the state legislature next year when a host of other sales taxes expire. This is the wish of the governor, and we were happy to accommodate him since he was so gracious in helping us. So our projections assume that the bill will be reauthorized, and therefore we'll have the benefit of December 2020 revenue. Legally, we have only until November 2020 until the legislature acts, which I assume will happen just about a year, probably the end of June of next year. But just to give you an example, this is additional revenue this year that will go into the budgets of every village in this county, every town in this county, the cities of Rise City and Peekskill, and the school districts in this county that are short of the 4 major school districts. And the reason why they're not included is they have in their municipalities their own sales taxes levied by their local governments, and they get that authority from the state independent, Yonkers, Mount Vernon, New Rochelle, and White Plains. For every other school district and every town or village, there's an additional amount of money that's listed on these documents. And to give you some sense of what that represents, if you live in the town of Greenburgh right here, we're going to hear from a supervisor in a second, between now and the end of the year, Greenburgh town will receive an additional $1 million of revenue, $1,057,111 of additional revenue for the town of Greenburgh that they did not budget for, that they can put in their reserve fund. They can use it to deal with unexpected costs. They can use it for capital projects. They can roll it over and deal with the tax issues. And next year, for a full year, Greenburgh will receive an additional $2,292,529 as one example of all these different municipalities from Ardsley A to Yorktown Y on this alphabetized list. Keep in mind that the budget that was submitted to the state legislature did not include an increase in aid to municipalities. So every village and every town that is benefiting from this action is getting something because of our agreed working together between the state and the county that no other town or village anywhere else in the state has. No other county in this state shares as universally additional sales tax revenue as Westchester County does. And that means that even though there was no additional increase in AIM money for these villages and towns, by our common action today, we have delivered to our colleagues in local government the money that they need, some of the money they need, less for the schools, more for their municipal governments, that they need and deserve in order to provide whatever it is that you and the voters of your district think are appropriate. You deserve this. This isn't a gift. This is something you deserve. And I'm very happy that the state legislature and the county legislature and I and the governor could deliver this to you. I have one more document to read, and then we're going to hear from some other speakers. We received today, it actually came out on the 8th of July, from Standard & Poor's Global Ratings, an article. I'm not going to read all of it, but it's there for members of the press to see. This was something we had hoped for, unexpected. Westchester County's New York sales tax increase is integral to stabilizing credit quality. And I'll just read the first paragraph. Westchester County, listed as AA plus with a negative outlook. New York's pending increase of its sales tax rate represents a step toward restoring budgetary balance and will likely have a positive credit impact, according to S&P Global Ratings. We have asserted that we're on the road back. This is an indicator that we are, in fact, on the road back. So with that, there's many people that I would like to have something. I wish every single person could say something, but we owe a debt of gratitude to many of them to say a few words. Our host here is the supervisor of the town of Greenburgh, Paul Feiner, and we're going to ask him to be first up and a few others to follow. Supervisor Feiner.
Thank you very much. I was noticing that Ellen Hendricks, a new councilwoman, is standing right under a light bulb, a light that's out. And I just want to mention that with the $2.2 million that we're going to be getting, don't worry, that light bulb is going to be replaced. But I just wanted to mention that Westchester has a distinction of having the highest property taxes in the United States. And I think this new law will help us move towards ending that unwanted distinction. But just because we're getting more revenue doesn't mean we have to spend the revenue. And I think that the challenge for all elected officials is not to overspend, but to use the money prudently and wisely to look for ways for additional cost sharing of services, because the goal shouldn't be being number 2 or number 3 in terms of our distinction of being the highest among property taxpayers in the country, but maybe we could get to the middle of the range. And I think that if we all are fiscally responsible, we could really make a dent, and we could end that distinction. And if Westchester ends that that distinction, we're going to be in great shape, and it's going to make Westchester a much more desirable place for people to want to move to. So thanks a lot. And again, I just want to say one other thing. When I saw that we were getting $2.2 million, it reminded me of the day I found out that I passed the bar exam. I was afraid to ask for a recount.
Thank you to Supervisor Feiner, our host. So from the state level, we owe a great debt of gratitude to Governor Andrew Cuomo. It was his decision to sign this into law that meant that this would happen. And without that signature, we wouldn't be having a day like this. So although he's not present today, I want to be clear to thank him for his leadership on this, for being there and having confidence that this represents fiscal stability. And I have every reason to prove that his judgment in believing in us was rightly placed. Thank you, Governor Cuomo. That also would not have happened if it was not for the leadership in both houses of the state legislature. Speaker Carl Hastie obviously could not be here today, but he and the leaders of the Assembly, will hear from Tom Abenanti in a moment. Gary Pretlow could not be with us today. Amy Poland and Sandy Gale, of some of the more senior members, also could not be here today. But the leadership in the Assembly was essential. Having served in the Assembly, I know what kind of a process it goes through to get something through the Assembly. They were very concerned about the issues of progressivity and taxation, very concerned about the commitments on the parkland, and we're very appreciative that they were satisfied enough to be able to pass it. And thank you, Tom, and your colleagues in the Assembly. From the state Senate, we couldn't have a better friend than Andrea Stewart-Cousins. 20 years ago, maybe a little more than that, 20 years ago, we served together in the county legislature, and we both had leadership roles in those days. And then just recently, before taking on this job, I had the great good fortune to be on her team in the state Senate. And we turned to her, and it was a very difficult thing to do. We all know the internal politics of Albany and the internal politics of districts all across New York State, and that came into play. But she was there for us. She was steady Eddie and all of these things. And once again, another person without support would not have happened. Senator Andrea Stewart-Cousins.
Thank you, George. And as I was standing here next to Senator Shelley Mayer and listening to the remarks, It reminded me of the good work that we had done together when I was on the county legislature, and the good work that can be done if we decide on every level of government to work together. It is not usual for a bunch of elected officials to stand together to, applaud themselves about increased taxes. Unless, and I think we all get this, we understand that to make government work, it takes resources. And these resources come from a variety of ways. And the fact that the county executive spent a good deal of time with the county legislature, with the appropriate staff, and making sure that we on the state level understood, A, what the commitments would be to make sure that that taxes would be held down on the county level, how the sharing of these revenues would benefit each and every municipality for the most part in this county, and how there would be a further effort to preserve parkland, and how there was a continued commitment to be partners going forward. It was a hard thing to say no to. We are all part of this county, just as we represent people across the state. And when government works well together, it makes sense, and it's easy to applaud something like this. So I want to thank the county executive for all that he's done with the legislature, and certainly my colleagues. We've mentioned Senator Shelley Mayer and Senator Alessandra Biaggi, Senator Carlucci, Senator Harcum, Senator Jamal Bailey, all of us representing Westchester County with our colleagues in the Assembly, and we couldn't be prouder. Thank you.
Whenever a politician begins to believe that they're indispensable, they realize that they leave a position and somebody follows them. And then you begin to realize just how good you were or weren't when you see how well your successor performs. I have the privilege of seeing my successor as a state senator, my successor as a state assemblyman, and my successor as a county legislator, all three of them performing brilliantly in those jobs. And I'm just glad that I didn't stay too long at the fair, so that you'd have the ability to have the joy of seeing Senator Shelley Mayer, Assemblyman Steve Otis, and County Legislator Catherine Parker. Shelley Mayer has been a friend for a long time. We served together in the Assembly and then together through different positions. Her leadership on this was tremendous, sponsoring the bill in the Senate, and we talked numerous times, early morning, late at night, as she tried to help me guide through the process of what it would take for this to get done. Shelley, I owe you a debt of gratitude.
Thank you, George. Thank you very much, George. Thank you for your leadership. I think, I am proud to be here today with my colleagues in government on a bipartisan basis, representing towns and villages and school districts throughout Westchester. It shows that government can work together, as the majority leader said, when we put our mind to it and when we have a bigger goal. And I want to commend the county executive for understanding that stability for the county was something worth fighting for, particularly when it was coupled with a commitment to keep property taxes as is, and at the same time to benefit our municipalities and most of our school districts, which have suffered from, frankly, what I believe is inadequate state funding. So this is a win for all. It's hard to see that a increase in sales tax is a win, but sometimes it is the most modest and progressive solution to a very difficult problem. And I want to give the county executive particular credit for bringing everyone together. Not everyone in elected office or politics is capable of sharing the credit, sharing the information, making a group effort. And it is really a credit to him that we are all here today, because this is a good move for Westchester, a good move, I would say, as the chair of the Education Committee, for every child in our school districts and for our municipalities. Thank you, George. Thank you very much.
Almost 30 years ago, I entered the county legislature in a class of 4 other colleagues, one of whom was Tom Abenanti. We were freshmen of the county legislature together. We served at leadership positions side by side for 4 years in the county. A few years after that, we wound up being colleagues in the state assembly. It has been his leadership on the issue, and while I gave the pen to David McKay Wilson, if I had a duplicate pen, I'd give it to Tom, because he was insistent on the issue of parkland protection, and I agreed with him in principle, and we found a way to get to both goals. And Tom, your aggressive leadership is welcomed. Please share your thoughts here in your hometown.
Thank you, George. Having served as a county legislator for almost 19 years, I saw the good that county government could do if it has the resources. I also saw how difficult it is to be the county executive in times when you don't have the resources. George has managed to bring everyone together, to give everybody a new spirit, so that we all look forward and not back, and we see how good county government can be. Now all we have to do is find the resources so a good county executive can do all of the things that we all want done. So I'm very pleased to have been part of the effort to give you those resources. What I saw after I left the County Board of Legislators was that the county train was rushing headlong into a financial disaster. There was going to be a financial train wreck if something wasn't done. When George got elected and presented his first budget, he hit the brakes. He slowed that train down. But he realized he was not going to be able to stop it and turn it around unless we did something dramatic. And he came to us with a dramatic plan. And we adopted that plan. We gave him that spur so that his train can come off of that track and turn around and start going in the opposite direction. What's the best part of this plan, I think, is not only are you saving the taxpayers of the county property taxes, you're also throwing a lifeline, if I can mix metaphors here, to our school districts, our towns, and our villages who do not have alternative revenue sources. The sales tax is an alternative revenue source. This constitutes a Homeowners Protection Act. A Homeowners Protection Act for all property taxpayers in Westchester County. A Homeowners Protection Act for all property taxpayers in Westchester County. So we should be proud of what we did here. As we look, we see our school districts are going to benefit, our villages and towns are going to benefit, so long as Westchester County benefits, so long as Westchester County continues to thrive. And I'm back to where I started. Under George's leadership, I see Westchester County thriving and doing very, very well in the future, and we're going to get lots of tax revenue as a result of this move. So thank you for giving me a chance to be part of this today, and thank you for your leadership.
Thank you. The chair of our Board of Legislators, Ben Boykin, was forced to take his colleagues on the board through numerous hoops. And those hoops came at the last minute. Ben, can you do a meeting like in 10 minutes? Can you? Which you legally can't do that. But we need a homeroom message for this. We need a homeroom message for that. We need to do this and we need to do that. These 17 individuals, both parties, and I've said this many times from my tenure there, my leadership there, and now no longer there, are underappreciated. People don't really realize how much they do and how on their own initiative they individually have ideas for the public benefit. But in the case of both the county and the local governments, whenever we need state legislation, we have to go through a certain process. And the process isn't always exactly the same between the two houses. But whatever that process is, Ben Boykin, with the help of Alfreda Williams, with the help of Catherine Parker and Mary Jane Shimsky, and support on both sides of the aisle, he led the legislature through all of the necessary steps, and I owe him a debt of gratitude. Any one of those steps having been missed, we wouldn't be here today. Ben Boykin, Chairman of the Board of Legislators.
Thank you, County Executive Latimer. And as you see, I'm joined by many of my colleagues from the County Board of Legislators. And it has been a long road, but we got there. And there were those 24-hour calls for special meetings. There was home rule resolutions at regular meetings, at special meetings. Oh, we need another special meeting. We actually called the special meeting a week ago Sunday, so that we could have a meeting last Monday to approve the enacting legislation that the governor had signed. And I want to personally thank the county executive and your leadership team for leading this effort. And then to the county board for always being there with us, to be able to take the call arranged a special meeting to make sure that we sent up the home rule resolutions that the Assembly was looking for, sometimes the Senate, usually the Assembly, to make sure that we didn't miss a beat, because we did not want to miss a beat. And because we didn't miss a beat, we're able to be here today and announce this increase in revenue that will help the county, will help our local school districts, and that will help our local municipalities. And to the governor, I want to thank him for signing it. To the New York State Senate, Majority Leader Andres Cousin, thank you for your leadership working with Senator Shelley Mayer and others to make this possible. And on the Assembly side, Tom Abernathy and Gary Pretlow and others in the Assembly for going through making sure that we were able to get this done. We're now on a path that we can stabilize the county's finances. As the county executive mentioned, he's going to put $5 million, or commit $5 million to go into this year's fund balance. And when you have a $1,940 million budget, and you only have $65 million in your rainy day fund, you can do the math. That's not a lot of money. So we've got to rebuild our fund balance. And after we do that, we must continue to deliver the essential services that the taxpayers and the residents of Westchester County expect. And that's what we're going to do. So this is a great day for all of us. Obviously, the four major cities, White Plains, Yonkers, New Rochelle, and Mount Vernon, they're already at the 8 3/8 or higher. Yonkers is higher. They won't share in this. But for the other municipalities, this is really a windfall for them. And this will help them out immensely, and I'm glad we were able to do this. Thank you very much.
We have a couple more speakers that I want to invite up here. They represent the municipal governments and the school districts of Westchester County. There are 45 municipal governments, counting all villages, towns, and cities. I'm not sure exactly how many. Karen, how many exact school districts do we have? Karen Belanger, the new school board. Are we 30-ish or so? 48. So that's how far behind the ball I am. 48 school districts, wholly or in part, in Westchester County. And I served on one of those, City Council of Rye. Josh Cohn, the current mayor, is here. And it so happens in Rye City, it's an unpaid city councilman position. Larchmont is an unpaid. Pleasantville is unpaid. There's a few others like that, Scarsdale. But whether you get a pittance or nothing at all, you sit there as a resident of your community trying to do what you think is best for your community. You know, very few presidents of the United States started out as a village trustee or as a local council member. It's not the beginning of a big political career. It's something you do for your community in the same way that you serve on a board of a not-for-profit in your community. And you sit and wrestle with the same issues that happen all the way up to the national level of government. How are you going to provide certain services? How are you going to negotiate contracts? How are you going to deal with severe weather when severe weather comes? And how are you going to deal with the changing demographics of communities that require different programs, new services? Every one of these people, and they represent both Republicans and Democrats, struggle with that in an environment where they're held accountable, and supervisors and village mayors every 2 years, with one or two exceptions, every other year before the electorate, to show what they've done and how they've done it. One of those supervisors I'd like to speak is Warren Lucas. Warren had an extensive career as a corporate executive with IBM, and he understands how to manage at a very high level in the business world. But in managing the town of North Salem in the extreme northeastern corner of the county, he has a community that doesn't look like the southern part of Westchester County, but he has residents who have significant expectations. And I have a great sense of compassion for Warren and all of his colleagues, to the point that when certain issues came up that weren't going well in North Salem, Kitley Koval raised it to my attention. We asked Warren and some of his key people, I know he's joined by Councilman Peter Kamenstein with him here today, and I said, Warren, come in, let's talk about it. Let's see what progress can we make. Because Warren Lucas and everybody like him, the Ron Belmonts, the Kevin Rays, the Frank, I'm losing the name, Frank, help me. Of course. And Michael Sabatino, and every single person, Kevin Hansen, every person is in the same exact situation. They are trying to do what's best for their hometown. And they're doing it because they think it's the right thing to do. not because it leads them to some greater glory. There's no police escort driving them around wherever they go. There's no rose petals in front of their feet. If anything, they show up and somebody says, hey, my garbage didn't get picked up. What's the deal with that, Dana Leverberg? You going to come out and pick it up for me? So anyway, Warren has been an exceptional town supervisor, and we'd like for him to share a few thoughts about this. Warren?
Frank, I'm sorry. That was very nice, George. Thank you very much. I just really want to thank George, the Senate, and the Assembly folks that worked on this for their leadership. This is something that would not have happened. It would not have gotten the governor's signature unless everybody was behind this, and I want to thank you very much. And I would think that if when you look at how we're all standing here together and you look down in Washington, how things work, wouldn't it be great if everybody could actually get behind something and get it done? Everybody's going to have a different story. Paul's going to replace some light bulbs. I've been telling everybody in my budget message for the last 4 years, I have to get the road paving number up to this so we can stop borrowing money to do road paving. And this happens to be exactly the number that's coming out of the sales tax. It was about $275,000. I think that is, I'm not the 2.2 million, it's a small town, but we'll take it. It equates to 4% of the town tax. And we had some disastrous problems in 2006. We stopped paving roads. 2007, we had some medical problems, self-insured on medical. I don't need to go into that, but we ate through all of our fund balance. And then I think everybody knows what happened in 2008 and 2009. And the first thing that goes are the capital projects. So I don't have to do that this year. You don't have to paint your house. You don't have to change the washing machine. You don't have to pave the roads. You don't have to do the drainage. And those are the things that tend to fall behind, and nobody notices it until it really falls apart. And that's the situation that we're in. That's the situation that a lot of municipalities are in. And so this extra sales tax, and I know we call it regressive, but there isn't any tax on food, clothing items under $110. I don't think there's tax on. I don't think there's tax on prescription drugs and stuff. So it's not necessarily as regressive as a real estate tax. But everybody is in this situation where you need the money to do the things that you absolutely have to get done. And this is just going to plug a hole in my budget, and it's phenomenal, right? We keep on talking, and just to throw a number out, we keep on talking about aid to municipalities from the state, and this is no offense to any of our Senate or Assembly folks up here. But my number out of aid to municipality is $20,713. That's the number I get from the state for aid on a $9 million budget. This is well over 10, 12 times that amount. Absolutely huge difference. And I just want to thank you, George, for your leadership. Thank you. Very much appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Our next to last speaker is Ray Sanchez, who is the superintendent of the Ossining School District. We have a number of school superintendents who are here. I see Ed Klish's from Portchester. And we have with us, by the way, the superintendent from White Plains, which is not a beneficiary of this. And so, Joe, we're very appreciative that you're here to show moral support for us. And then the tax freeze does include White Plains residents as well as other residents. But Ray, on behalf of the various school districts, do share a few thoughts with us, would you?
All right, so good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So I want to thank the county executive, our legislators in the Senate and the Assembly, our county legislators, and for everyone for the proposal. This is certainly, just broadly speaking, this is about opportunity. This gives us an opportunity to address the ever-growing needs of our children within our school districts. In the case of Ossining, we have growing enrollment and greater needs, and we struggle oftentimes in trying to maintain programs that we have, and certainly are always seeking ways to address and enhance some of the services that we provide. And at the same time, trying to maintain and address a very fiscally responsible budget for our local municipalities and our communities. And so I want to thank our county executive and everyone involved, even our governor, for his support and for including our school districts in the proposal. I know I speak on behalf of others that while the needs are different, this is all focused and going to have a positive impact on children. And so it goes beyond when we say it's going to impact school districts. I would say just a reminder that this is going to have an impact on children, a positive impact on the children we serve and on the future of not only this county, but our state and our entire country. So once again, thank you very much for the support, and we look forward to continuing working in collaboration with everyone. Thank you.
So just before I open it up to questions from the press, I know it's been a long process, and I apologize. I wanted to make sure different voices were heard from this situation. Let me just highlight a couple of other facts that should be out there in your mind. This is a 1 penny on a dollar additional levy. That's 1%. It goes from 7.38 to 8.38 in those communities that were at the lower amount. There are people out there who want to misrepresent what this is. They take 1% and they divide it over 7 3/8%, and they get a different percentage. That's a rate percentage. That's not a tax percentage. If you buy a table for $100 and you paid $7.38 tax on it, you buy that same table for $100, you now pay $8.38. So you pay $108.38 rather than $107. It's one additional dollar per $100 of sales. However someone wants to morph a different percentage, understand that's the basic math. The second thing is sales tax is a consumption tax. You only pay that which you buy and consume. If you buy a $100 table, you pay tax proportionate to a $100 table. If you feel sensitive to the cost, you can buy a $90 table or an $80 table. You cannot negotiate your property taxes. So when given two revenue streams, and that's all these governments have. Yeah, we have fees on renting our tennis courts in our community, and we have some permit fees that you fill out. You could double them and triple them, but none of those represent significant revenue streams that you can run a diverse amount of services on or educate your children on. The bottom line is that a consumption tax is a different pocket that the money is coming from. Don't let anybody tell you, oh, it's just one tax, it's another tax. They're very different ways that they're collected, and the sales tax is based on what you buy. Your property tax is based on whatever the ad valorem value of your property is, and that's important to know. Final point to be made, we'll open it up to questions. We have to decide in this country, although we are county, state, municipals, we have to decide in this country, what do you expect out of your elected leaders? We all run for office. Almost everybody up here does. School district superintendents do not. Village managers and town administrators do not. But the rest of us do. What do you expect out of us? Do you want us to tell you exactly what you want to hear? Do you want me to tell you what I would love to be true, which is I could eat sweets and Italian food, not exercise, and drop weight? I'd like to tell you that. My life proves that it's not true. People are frustrated with their taxes. Me too, all of us. But they'd be more frustrated if we stopped the bus system. They'd be more frustrated if you closed a firehouse. They'd be more frustrated if you reduced the number of policemen patrolling the streets. So you tell me, what's the path? What's the path forward? Do we look at all revenue as being intrinsically evil, some type of confiscatory plan? Or do you say that to have a society in which you have proper policing and proper fire protection, and you treat sewerage, and you have a jail for people that need to be incarcerated, and you have people going inside a restaurant to check to make sure that there's sanitary conditions in the restaurant, and that you have somebody that attaches a plow to the front of a DPW truck and cleans up the snow in your town and village? Or that when your child enters kindergarten, that they can exit at the end of grade 12, and if they are so desired, go on to college, go on to whatever a positive life is. I'm very fortunate to have an adult daughter, married, 2 children, gainfully employed, and I credit the Rye City School District in part for that. And that is part of what services are in the town, in the village, in the school district, in the county. So let's talk common sense to the American people. We may not hear a lot of it at other levels. It's really not for me to say. Let's talk common sense. Common sense. Stop pandering to what people want. Tell them the truth. Show them the real budgets and how tough it is to balance the budget in the village of Mount Kisco. How tough it is to balance that budget in the village of Dobbs Ferry. Don't tell them there's an easy way out in the town village of Harrison, because there isn't. Don't run down to Portchester Village Hall and tell them what you're angry about. Understand the frustrations and what they have to do to provide those services. Hold us accountable, but accountable not on rhetoric and ideology, but hold us accountable to what we actually do with the power when you give it to us. And if you give us that power on election day, understand how we used it and why we did. The story is easily written as a tax. And if you want to write the story that way, I can't tell you what to do. You'll do it the way you want to. But that's not the story here. The story here is there's a problem, and we understood what we had to do to solve it. There is no one hero of this story. It's not me. I've already said, governor doesn't sign it. State, Senate, and Assembly don't pass it. Board of Legislators doesn't have a meeting. Local officials don't support it. It doesn't happen for any one of those reasons. And that's something to remember. Leadership is not about one person on a white horse. It's all of us. And we have to figure out how to work through the fact that some of us are Republicans and some of us are Democrats. And some of us are old and some of us are young. Some of us are white and some of us are black and some of us are Latino and some are straight and some are gay. We're not all alike, and we have to figure out how to work through it. We got to figure out how to work through it together with respect, understanding everybody has a need. And your need has to be answered as well, not just mine and not just some other person's need. I've been blessed by some very talented people that I want to stand up, and then we'll go to questions. Joan McDonald, please stand up. Emily Saltzman, our Deputy Director. Larry Sewell, our Budget Director. Deputy Budget Director Gideon, please stand up. Andrew Ferris, Chief of Staff. Catherine Chaffee is here. John Nona, County Attorney. I can't see everybody. Vic Mallison. Please, executive team, stand up. This is the team that delivered this alongside everybody. How can I thank you? Now we go to questions. Fire away. Tony.
Setting aside this memo to Joan McDonald and Larry Sewell, it's not clear to me how the county property taxpayers are protected by this, because what is to stop the county board from passing a budget next year that sets the county property tax levy at $578 million or $562 million?
Well, there's nothing today, Tony, that would stop that from happening by law. You have a commitment from me in writing that we will submit a budget to the board at that level. And Ben and the members of the Board of Legislators have their prerogative, and all you members of the press will watch everything we do. And it's going to be, it's going to be
a budget that goes beyond that?
I'm sorry?
Will you commit today to vetoing a budget that goes beyond the 500?
My commitment is to deliver that budget. How we get there, it could be jawboning before we ever get to the veto pen. I do have a veto pen. I do have line item veto authority. They know I do. They also have the ability to override a veto if they've got 12 votes to do that. I don't know that we're going to have to go that way, because I think you'll see the spirit of cooperation will continue to do that. Should the board, in their independent judgment, want to see money spent on additional things that might put us above 571, then it becomes the opportunity for the executive branch to determine, can we satisfy that desire without breaking 571? And that may be exactly what we do, and that's what is done, every cycle through. But I think the commitment that we've made is real. We wouldn't have had a press conference a week later with memos that this is what we're going to do if we didn't intend to follow through on it. But all I can say is I know you will, follow the process through. We intend to deliver on what we've said. And hopefully that's exactly how this will turn out. David?
You talk about this sales tax parity within New York, but what about Connecticut? Connecticut's at 6.35. You think people are going to go to Connecticut?
Well, I think what happens is people make decisions based on what's rational. Is it rational for you to get in a car and drive to another state, Connecticut or New Jersey, to buy a product of a certain level? If you're going to, gut your kitchen and buy a whole new set of kitchen appliances, that's one buying decision. If you're going to buy a pair of pants because you ripped them, which is exactly what I did on Wednesday night, I went to a store one town away from me to buy a new pair of khaki slacks. Did I decide that I wanted to drive to the Stamford Town Mall? No, I didn't. Matter of personal preference. I don't think that the sales tax rate will make a difference in the amount of revenue for this reason. It doesn't make a difference right now. Ask yourself internally, holiday shopping season, did you once ever decide that you were going to shop in community A or community B because of the sales tax rate? Ask yourself that. White Plains was at 8 3/8. It has all of the major department stores you could want. Central Avenue in Yonkers is at 8 5/8, and it has a host of department stores. When did you say, wait a minute, here's the dotted border line at Inverness, and I'm crossing from Yonkers into Greenburgh, and when I get to the corner of Ardsley Road, I'm going to save 1% in sales tax. Let me buy that pair of socks in Greenburgh and not in David, I don't think that's a rational reality. Now, in terms of Connecticut and New Jersey, and for that matter, every other state in the union, we cannot, as a local government, work outside of the structure and the framework that we have. We look for parity within our county and parity to counties around us in New York State. The structure of Connecticut taxation is different from ours. And by the way, if you cover Connecticut right now, you have more people angry about their taxes in Connecticut. Their property taxes are lower and the sales taxes are lower, but they are complaining mightily about the unitary tax that is causing businesses to flee Connecticut. And New Jersey is not a tax-free paradise. I would tell you, though, when you were in Chicago, you should have driven north to Milwaukee because Wisconsin has lower taxes. And whatever buying you were going to do for the holiday season, had you done it in Wisconsin, you'd be better off. But you didn't do it because why? Because you weren't there to buy things. That's the rational decisions we're all going to make. I think we're going to be fine with making sales tax parity in the county. Other questions from Dennis?
What do you say to the small business owners, the mom and pop stores that are constantly struggling, as far as maintenance, the rents, holding on to maybe 1 or 2 employees, where every nickel, every penny counts?
Well, Shari Rosen Asher, who's in the room, and myself go to Chamber of Commerce meetings. I dare say that she and I attend more Chamber of Commerce meetings than any other 2 people in the county of Westchester. And we talked about this in a number of these places. When you shop locally in the town that you live in, you generally shop there because A, it's physically convenient to you. When you make the decision to drive a further distance of any sort, it's because you're looking for a diversity of product, or you're looking not just to find one product in one kind of store, but a series of things that you might find in a mall or a defined shopping area. That mom and pop store that you talk about in that community oftentimes is close to you physically, and secondly, it represents a store owner who knows your personal preferences. And when you go in, they greet you warmly. You want more information on that? Talk to Catherine Parker, who ran Parker's on Purchase Street in Rye for an extended period of time. You know the real threat to the mom and pop stores? It's not this. It's internet sales. Internet sales is the real threat to mom and pop stores. And depending on how the state, which will keep the sales tax money from internet sales, depending on how they choose to use that, the executive branch will determine whether or not some of that money goes for efforts to promote buying local in ways that are real and tangible. And if that can come out of this process, then that would be helpful. But again, I think Catherine's experience is more alert. There's other people here too who can speak to that, and hopefully they'll I think highlight the fact that yes, mom and pop stores struggle, but the difference of this, particularly when they're dealing with, if you have a store in Larchmont and Rye and Scarsdale, they're all kind of competitive shopping districts. Everything that's happening is happening to all 3 at the same time. Other questions? I think I have exhausted your goodwill. Any other questions? If not, we do have some refreshments. To the men and women of government, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.